So Late in the Day, written by Claire Keegan and published by Grove Press in November of 2022, with a snippet read by Richard Coombs. Available for checkout right now at the Alice Pendleton Library. On Friday, July 29th, Dublin got the weather that was forecast. All morning a brazen sun shone across the Merrion Square, reaching onto Cathal's desk, where he was stationed by the open window. A taste of cut grass blew in every now and then, and a close breeze stirred the ivy on the edge. When a shadow crossed, he looked out. A gulp of swallows skirmishing high up in camaraderie. Down on the lawns, some people were out sunbathing, and there were children and beds plump with flowers. So much of life carrying smoothly on, despite the tangle of human upsets and the knowledge of how everything must end. Already the day felt long. When he looked again, at the top of the screen again, it read 14:27. He wished now that he had gone out at lunchtime and walked as far as the canal. He could have sat on one of the benches there for a while and watched the mute swans and cygnets gobbling up the crusts and other scraps people threw down there on the water. Without meaning to, he closed the budget distribution file he'd been working on before saving it. A flash of something not unlike contempt charged through him then, and he got up and walked down the corridor, as far as the men's room, where there was no one, and pushed into a stall. For a while he sat on the lid, looking at the back of the door, on which nothing was written or scrawled, until he felt a bit steadier. Then he went to the basin and splashed water on his face, and slowly dried his face and hands on the paper towel, which fed automatically from the dispenser. On the way back to his desk, he stopped for a coffee, pressed the Americano option on the machine, and waited for it to spill down into the cup. It was almost ready when Cynthia, the brightly dressed woman from accounts, came in, laughing on her mobile. She paused when she saw him and soon hung up. "All right there, Cathal?" "Yeah," he said. "Grand. You?" "Grand," she smiled. "Thanks for asking." He took up the coffee, leaving before he'd sugared it, before she could say anything more. When he got back to his desk and looked at the top of the screen, it was 14:54. He was just reopening the file and reading over what was there, and was about to compose some of the changes he would again have to make, when the boss stopped by. The boss was a northern man, a good 10 years younger than himself, who wore designer suits and played squash at the weekends. "Well, Cathal, how are things?" "Good," Cathal said. "Thanks." "Did you get a bite of lunch for yourself, or something to eat?" "Yeah," Cathal said. "No bother." The boss was looking him over, taking in the usual shirt, tie, and trousers, his unpolished shoes. "You know, there's no need to stay on," the boss said. "Why don't you call it a day?" He flushed a little then, seeming uneasy over the well-intentioned phrase. "I'm just finishing the budget outline now," Cathal said. "I'd like to get this much done." "Fair enough," the boss said. "Whatever, take a handy." The boss withdrew then to his office, and Cathal heard the door softly closing. When he looked back out, the sky was blank and blue. He took a sip of the bitter coffee and stared again at the file he hadn't saved. It wasn't easy to see it now in the glare of the sunlight, so he changed the font to bold and titled the screen. For a while, he tried again to focus on what was there, but in the end decided to settle down to the raft of letters which would all be identical except for the name. "Dear Blank, thank you for your application for a bursary in visual arts. The selection committee has now convened and made its decisions. The final round was extremely competitive, and we regret to inform you that on this occasion..." By 5 p.m., he had most of the rejections printed on letterhead and was waiting on the landing for the lift. When he heard someone coming, he pushed through a door to the stairwell. It was hotter and smelled musty in there. The Polish girl who cleaned after hours was leaning against the banister, texting. He felt her watching him as he passed, and was glad to reach the foot of the stairs and the exit to get out onto the street, where it was noisy and a hot queue of cars pushed at the traffic lights. He took his tie off and felt his jacket for the bus pass, which was there in his breast pocket, and walked to the Davenport to wait for the Arklow bus. For no particular reason, a part of him doubted that the bus would come that day, but it soon came up Westland Row and pulled in, as usual, to let the passengers on. Almost every seat was occupied, and he had to take the aisle seat beside an overweight woman who slid a bit closer to the window to give him room.